Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Rotoballer Radio's Waiver Wire series. I'm your host, Anthony Aniano. Happy to be with you here as we take a look at Week 13 of the fantasy football season. Folks, don't forget, head over to rotoballer.com and check out everything we have there. The main page, premium package, expert chats, you name it. Rotoballer.com has it for you. Baseball, football, basketball, MMA, esports, PGA, NASCAR, sports betting, you name it. DFS or season-long formats, rotoballer.com, the place to be. Sign up for any of our premium passes using the promotional code ACES and save yourself an additional 10% discount. All right, guys, Week 12 just about in the books. 2 weeks left in our fantasy regular season. Should be in most formats. Weeks 13 and 14. Playoffs should be starting Week 15 in most leagues, unless your league didn't adjust. Or if you only use 2 weeks for the playoffs, then it would be Week 16 and 17. We had some injuries in Week 12 to be mindful of. Well, first off, we had Cam Newton, who's terrible, get benched. Jalen Hurts got banged up against the Giants' defense. At the running back position on Thanksgiving Day, DeAndre Swift left with a shoulder injury. Christian McCaffrey seen in a walking boot after the Carolina Panthers game. Okay, Dalvin Cook carted off the field with what they think is a shoulder injury. Deebo Samuel dealing with a groin. Randall Cobb left the game with a groin injury. And at the tight end position, Dan Arnold with a knee, Pat Freiermuth with a concussion possibly, and Darren Waller on Thanksgiving Day with a knee injury that they're saying is not too serious. Let's go through the waiver wire. We'll start at the quarterback position. And the player I want to be my number one quarterback ad, if you need to. Now, keep in mind, we have 4 teams on a bye Week 13. Tennessee Titans, okay, Dontrell Hilliard, and Deonta Foreman both on a bye. Ryan Tannehill to a lesser extent. The wide receivers were all beat up there in Tennessee. The Cleveland Browns on a bye. Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper. The Green Bay Packers, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, another week to get healthy. A.J. Dillon, who had a big game against the Rams on Sunday. Aaron Rodgers, all on a bye. And the Carolina Panthers, McCaffrey, another week to get that ankle healed up. Maybe he doesn't miss any time. DJ Moore, okay, and Cam Newton on a bye for Week 13. So going back to my ads at the quarterback position, I really want Mac Jones of the New England Patriots to be my number one ad of the week at quarterback if you need to make up for Cam Newton, Aaron Rodgers, Tannehill, or potentially any injuries. The problem is with Mac Jones is not his performance, it's that he's on the road next week against the Buffalo Bills. Makes him a risky play. 38% rostered on Yahoo. He goes 23 for 32, 310 yards, and 2 more passing touchdowns. The kid looks just flat out terrific for the New England Patriots, and another victory for them. 25.5 fantasy points. 2 of his last 3 games, he's gotten near 25 fantasy points, and he has 6 touchdown passes over his last 3. Again, the only hesitation from him being a rock-solid number one waiver wire ad for me is on the road in Buffalo and that Buffalo defense next week. Big game in the AFC East. At number 2 is Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. I loved his efficiency in Week 12. 27 of 31. Okay, 230 yards and 1 touchdown. 15.2 fantasy points. Gaskin did a lot of the end zone work. He got 2 touchdowns today. Goes against the Giants. I know the Giants handled the Eagles, but it's still the Giants defense. Okay, 2 and not in a bad matchup. At number 3, that same game, Daniel Jones against the Miami secondary that has been beat up of late. They're one of the lower-ranked secondaries against opposing quarterbacks. 19 of 30, 202 yards, 1 touchdown. Also ran the ball for 30 yards against the Eagles on Sunday. Listen, Giants offense still needs a lot of work. Saquon was okay. Galladay still not involved enough, in my opinion. But Daniel Jones, a decent matchup against the Miami Dolphins. Okay, and admittedly, this is desperation, 2 QB league quarterback potentially, or really just pure desperation. At number 4 is Jimmy Garoppolo, who's just been steady. People will figure by now for sure he would have lost his job to Trey Lance. Well, that's not happening. Okay, San Francisco with the victory over Minnesota goes to 6-5. Jimmy Garoppolo continues to manage the game well. He's got 7 TD passes over his last 4 games. In fact, this week, week 12 against Minnesota, first time in 3 weeks, he did not throw 2 touchdown passes. Deebo Samuel runs for 2. Eli Mitchell runs for 1. The San Francisco running game was able to dominate that game against the Minnesota Vikings. But Jimmy Garoppolo, 34% rostered, throws for 230 and a touch. And he's got a nice matchup, although on the road, but against that Seattle defense, you can move the ball on Seattle. I expect San Francisco to win that game and be able to move the ball well, with Jimmy Garoppolo playing a role in that. And my 5th and final quarterback, even though we haven't seen Monday Night Football, I'm still all in on Tyler Heineke against the Las Vegas Raiders. I love the matchup. Heineke is Brett Favre light. He's a gunslinger type. Okay, he's 35% rostered. Assuming he comes out of the Monday night matchup healthy this week, then I roll Tyler Heineke off the waiver wire against the Vegas Raiders. Okay, so Mac Jones, 38% rostered. Tough matchup against Buffalo. Tua, 33% rostered against the Giants. Okay, the reality is, assuming Heineke comes out of Monday Night Football healthy, I go Heineke against the Raiders at 3. Daniel Jones, and then the desperation play, Daniel Jones against Miami at 28% rostered, and Garoppolo, 34% rostered, managing the game against the Seattle Seahawks in Week 13. Now, at the running back position, there's 2 names I got to mention, and they should be rostered, but if they're not, let's get them on our roster, and that starts with Alexander Mattison of the Minnesota Vikings. 49% rostered on Yahoo, and we say it all the time, Alexander Mattison should not be on any waiver wires. But if he is, with whatever fab you have left, if you have the first waiver claim, every claim goes to Alexander Mattison this week. He faces the Detroit Lions defense next week, assuming Dalvin Cook. When you're carted off the field, I do have my concerns about you playing next week. So that's my issue with Dalvin Cook. Alexander Mattison finished with 10.8 fantasy points in Week 12. He carried 21 yards and a touch, 2 catches for 7 yards. But he's 49% rostered, higher than what we normally have here on this show, but need to mention him. Also highly rostered is Deonta Foreman of the Tennessee Titans, 46% rostered. He goes 19 for 109, catches the ball for 3, had a 30-yard run. But keep in mind, Tennessee is on a bye. So both Deonta Foreman on a bye next week and Dontrell Hilliard, who's 28% rostered, he goes 12 for 131, including the 68-yarder that he busted. Touchdown, 1 catch for 12. Now, I mentioned Hilliard last week as a pass-catching option. I think he was targeted 10 times in Week 11. Okay, runs the ball super effectively. And obviously, Tennessee thinks they have something with the Hilliard-Foreman combination after releasing Adrian Peterson. But nonetheless, Hilliard at 28% rostered, Foreman at 46% rostered, but Tennessee on that bye Week 13, not going to help you. So it really depends on where you are. If you are in the playoffs and feeling good and sitting pretty, you go in for Hilliard, you go in for Foreman. But with 2 weeks left, if you're fighting for a playoff spot, they might not be your priority right now, right? Your priority may be some of these other running backs we're going to mention, like Matt Breida of the Buffalo Bills. Thanksgiving Day, Zach Moss inactive. Okay, Devin Singletary ran 15 times for 44 yards. Matt Breida ran 9 for 26, had 2 receptions for 29 yards and a receiving touchdown. 13.5 fantasy points as the Buffalo Bills are home against the New England Patriots. Matt Breida, 23% rostered. Or maybe you go in for Jamal Williams, another running back who should be rostered, right? Because he's a very good backup running back. So if you had DeAndre Swift, you should have had Williams on your roster. But Williams is only 39% rostered, so he is out there and available. He goes 15 for 65 after coming in for Swift on Thanksgiving Day. He also catches 5 balls on 5 targets for 18 yards, 13.3 fantasy points. And Detroit does have Minnesota next week. Now, Detroit we know was terrible, but look at what San Francisco and Eli Mitchell was able to do on the ground against that Minnesota defense. Jamal Williams could be in line for another 15-point type of day in a PPR format. A couple of other running backs to keep in mind. Chuba Hubbard of Carolina, like we mentioned, McCaffrey in the walking boot. He's 36% rostered. But again, if you have McCaffrey, get Hubbard back on your team. You probably had him and dropped him. Get him back. Carolina on the bye next week. And finally, Tevin Coleman of the Jets. I mentioned him last week. I said he's going to lead the team in carries this week. And I was right. He did carry the ball 16 times for 67 yards in the Jets' victory over the Houston Texans. Also had 2 catches for 3. Goes against the Philadelphia Eagles next week. Tevin Coleman, 18% rostered. So different things to look at here at the running back position. Breida, Williams, Madison, they help you next week. Coleman, maybe he helps you a little bit. I still don't have a lot of faith there. Hilliard, Foreman, Hubbard, bye weeks next week. More for a long-term play if you're already in the playoffs. Okay, at the wide receiver position this week on the waiver wire, Kendrick Bourne sits as my number 1 wide receiver ad. 22% roster. He's been a big play guy. 2 of his last 3 games with 23 fantasy points. This week, 5 catches on 6 targets, 61 yards, 2 touchdowns, 23 fantasy points. Tough matchup against Buffalo, but remember, Buffalo did lose their top cornerback to an ACL injury. At number 2 is Russell Gage of the Atlanta Falcons, 17% rostered. He's got 26 targets in his last 4 games. This past week, week 12, 6 for 62 and a touch, 18.2 points against the Tampa secondary that you can throw the ball on. At number 3 is Deshaun Jackson, the big boom or bust type of play, but a great matchup next week for the Raiders against the Washington secondary that has difficulty stopping anybody. Deshaun Jackson, 3 for 102 on Thanksgiving Day against Dallas and the touchdown. Laviska Shenault of the Jacksonville Jaguars sees an uptick in value now with Jamal Agnew out for the year. He catches only 5 balls for 33 yards, okay, facing the Rams next week, but he did have 9 targets this week, 22 targets in his last 3 games, 42% rostered. And again, if you're invested in Tennessee, Nick Westbrook, 20% rostered on a bye next week, but he did catch the touchdown, 2 for 25. So at the tight end, at the wide receiver position, we go Bourne, Gage, D. Jackson, Laviska Shenault, and then Nick Westbrook. And finally, at the tight end position, a couple of names. Cole Kmet should be the number 1 ad at the tight end position if you need an injury replacement, somebody on bye. Cole Kmet, 24% rostered. I can't ignore 11 targets by the Chicago tight end on Thanksgiving Day, 8 for 65. 21 targets his last 3 games as Chicago goes up against Arizona in Week 13. At number 2 is Jack Doyle, only 1% rostered, 6 for 81 on 6 targets. Carson Wentz looked to him often this week against Tampa Bay. He did have a touchdown, 20 points, and a great matchup for both Carson Wentz and Jack Doyle next week against the Houston Texans. And finally, if you have Darren Waller and you need to protect yourself, if he's a game-time decision, Foster Moreau, 1% roster, was targeted 5 times against Dallas, didn't do much with it, but he does have 3 touchdowns on the season. If you want to put a $1 bid in on a tight end because you had Waller, Foster Moreau is there for you. All right, everybody. Guys, don't forget, hit and subscribe right here to Rotoballer Radio's YouTube channel. Make sure you check out all the content all week long. You got this that starts the week with the waiver wire. Start sits all week long here on Rotoballer's YouTube or wherever you listen to the Rotoballer Radio podcasts. And then ends the week with Scott Angle and I, the King and Pocket Aces, talking sleepers and value plays. All right. Like we said, sign up at rotoballer.com, 10% using the promotional code ACES, and give me a follow on Twitter at Aniano Fantasy. All right, everybody. Good luck working the waiver wire. Hopefully you're locking down a playoff spot. Stay smart, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one, folks.